So, our next speaker is an astrologer, channel, and counselor who has a passion for diving deep into astrological charts to find the answers to burning questions that the stars can provide. She and I met years ago when taking our first Reiki course, and we had an instant connection. She was the first human being that I had ever met who was absolutely convinced that she had a multidimensional alien lineage and was just kind of visiting Earth, which to me at the time just sounded like crazy talk, and I didn't understand what the heck, was wrong with her. But here we are years later, knowing that we've shared many extraterrestrial past lives together and continue to influence each other on this crazy 3D paradise planet. So, here to interpret our likely path to a 5D society by charting astrological transits is BP, Bridget Pennisten. Hi.
Hello, I loved that introduction so much.
All right. Yeah. Well, it's all true, right? And I'm glad that you got it working. Bridget
Mhm.
BP had a last second, like, oh no, my computer's not working right before she was about to go on, but obviously it all worked out.
Yeah, the technology couldn't handle all the high vibes today.
That's right. Okay. Well, take it away, BP. I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, let's.
Whoop.
Oh, hey, it's me. So, hi, um, I'm Bridget Pennisten, but I go by BP, which are my initials. So, if you see BP on the screen, that is why. And like Zane said, I'm an astrologer and a channeler and a counselor. And in my work, I like to combine all three of those into one multi-dimensional experience. So when I present astrological topics, I'm usually channeling at the same time, particularly channeling galactic beings, which fits well with astrology. Stars, aliens, it works. The thing I'm really passionate about with astrology is bringing it to real life and making it easy to understand, but also really grounding it as something that we can use every single day and making astrology something that we can use to our advantage. Also, personally, I have been using astrology for predictions, and that's what we're going to be doing today. I've been tuning in throughout the day, catching all the goodness, and I think that you will enjoy this. Let's call it like a left brain logical break. Astrology is very mathematical and left brainy, so that's where we'll be coming from. And I've been asked to share if astrology can illustrate what the future will look like in the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 200 as we ascend. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that the stars absolutely mirror that reality. I like to think that the stars and the planets mirror our experience almost exactly, while also providing a broader perspective to see the events going on in the world rather than an individualized perspective. For me, I find it very helpful to see things from maybe a universal standpoint, especially when we're talking about a global transition to 5D. And you know, let's dive into it. Let's do the thing. I want to mention what we'll be going through astrologically. We'll be talking about a major shift in the dominant zodiac sign in the sky. That's going to be the strongest influence. And we'll also talk through what's going on with Saturn. We'll talk a little Jupiter, a little bit of Pluto. And then, if we have time, I've come up with some very specific predictions for what a 5D society over the next 200 years will physically manifest as in our earthly reality, and that will be based on the movements of the planets Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. So, yeah, let's do it. My favorite transit that I have found in preparing for this event is the one I want to share with you first because it's really encouraging. It's one of those where the stars are saying yes to all the things that we've been feeling as a collective, this shift in our values. And let's call it moving into the age of air or the age of Aquarius. I've heard age of Aquarius used as kind of a buzzword lately, but it's also very literal in terms of astrology. For the last 200 years of history on Earth, we've been in what's called the age of Earth. It was very Capricorn dominant Earth energy. And now, starting in 2020, this year, for the next 200 years, we will be moving into the age of air or age of Aquarius. I might use those two synonymously, it's the same thing. And there's a really potent change that comes just in the simplicity of a sign dominant switch. So, for the last 200 years, in the age of Earth, we had earthly values as a society. The things that we spent our, I don't know, our time, our focus, our energy on were earthly, heavy things. And I mean that in the most literal sense. The heaviness of coins and money and industry and machinery, manufacturing and corporations. Well, we'll get into that later. But a really deep heaviness in terms of what we found to be important as a society. And we can also think of it as, in a textbook sense, in the last 200 years, we went through something we call the Industrial Revolution because industry became most important to society, the global economy, making change. That was where, our innovation was. It's where our whole drive is. And this year is the year where, as a society, we're shifting into the age of air or age of Aquarius. I like to think the best way to summarize that shift comparison would be the Industrial Revolution versus moving into a communication revolution. And even in that, just naming it already sets the tone for the changes that we're going to be having. I think we should talk about the age of Aquarius a little bit, or why is it called that? There's going to be some major planets moving into Aquarius, and they're planets that move more slowly, so they'll be there for a long time. Aquarius itself, the sign that we're moving into, it rules a more humanitarian energy, whereas Capricorn is more of a paternal or patriarchal energy. It's more of a government structure, very serious, very much into material success, things of that sort. And Aquarius is much more equality based, humanitarian, very progressive. It's often called the sign of the future, which is really encouraging as we move forward. Aquarius is also called the global sign fairly often, and that coincides a lot with what we've been feeling and experiencing is more of a global situation. Aquarius also rules the internet, it rules technology, which are things that we've already seen begin to rapidly evolve, but we'll speak more on it. It also rules public health, which has very much come into our focus this year, and it will continue to do so. I like to think of Aquarius as the collective's energy because it does rule the collective, which means for the next 200 years, we're going to be thinking more about the entire collective rather than just ourselves or our work, our industry. We're just going to be looking towards the globe instead of like a one-lane track. So, like I said, 2020 is the catalyst year for this shift. And this shift into 5D can be expressed, through many different modalities. But astrologically speaking, it's beginning now in 2020. And this year sets the tone for all of the 20s, sets the tone for the next 20 years, for the next 140 years, and then the next 200. So I can safely say that by the end of the next decade, we won't even recognize our lives in the way that we currently know them. 2020 is astrologically like a catapult into this new cycle. It's really that big. But before we talk about what's coming in the next 10, I want to acknowledge the tension and the heaviness of this year. Because if someone told me that 2020 is the year that we take off into 5D just out of the blue, I might think, this year's been kind of messy. So let's talk about that briefly before we go forward. This year, 2020, is full of Capricorn energy. It's the last year of this age of Earth and industry. And there's tension building between the old and the new paradigms. But after this year, there's going to be that major breakthrough for the whole society. Capricorn, like I said, is all about social structures and power structures like government, corporations, banks, basically where the power is and where the responsibility is and consequences. So 2020 is going to bring awareness to our power structures. And following that is when they'll change. Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are the main players. You can think of them as like the team that's our support team in the sky that are going to help us from 2020 onward to take a look at some of those Capricornian structures from this year, like our institutions, and take a nice look at them and see for ourselves, like, have our leaders been acting in the highest good of the collective? Or have they been doing whatever it takes to maintain power? That's sort of the shadow side of Capricorn. And I think we're all experiencing a little bit of that shadow as we work through this. Tearing down the old stuff from this year and the systems of Earth and the way we do industry and government, it's important, but it's more important to talk about what we're rebuilding from it. We can all see it pretty blatantly crumbling. I think we're all pretty set on that. But what is it going to take for us to rebuild, and what will that look like? Jupiter is one of the especially optimistic influences we have going forward. Jupiter is a big picture kind of planet, and it's going to help us find the meaning in what truly matters. But all three of those planets, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, are going to help us redistribute power in a way that feels better for the collective, maybe taking some power from those who unfairly have it, and maybe giving it to those who have been traditionally powerless. And technically no one's powerless, but you know what I mean. It's a more equal distribution of power as an integral value that we'll all begin to share in a 5D future. And after 2020, 2021 is when it really starts. 2021 is what I'm going to call the liftoff point. So for this year, it might remain a little heavy. Truth be told, because we need to see it clearly in order to know what to change as we shift. But in 2021 is blast off time, and we're headed into that 5D, and it's really clearly mirrored through Saturn specifically. So I want to spend a quick couple of minutes on just Saturn alone. I've been talking about Saturn in many, many, many trainings this year. And Saturn has been the one that, it's just spot on. Saturn is moving into Aquarius. It'll be there until 2023. It's currently in Capricorn, but just briefly. By the end of the year, it'll shift back into Aquarius, and we'll have 3 years of, Saturn Aquarius mingling. And the main theme that comes with that is improving our social structures. With Saturn and Aquarius, we as a society will recognize that we're we're responsible for ourselves, but also for the community and for the collective. And ideally, we'll be able to move our egos to the side and do what's best for the collective. There'll be, a focus in ideas and principles, your contributions to the community. There's going to be efforts to reform and strengthen, or maybe rebuild would be a better word, structures in areas of community, of science, of technology, the rights of the individual, the rights of the group. Astrology. Astrology is one of them. And we're going to be posed with some questions from Saturn in Aquarius over the next 3 years that will benefit us. We're going to be thinking about whether or not individuals are taking enough responsibility for their communities, whether or not these social structures are supporting us in the ways that we need, whether or not we're doing the right things for our health, which has already begun to become apparent that we need to work on that. And that's what Saturn is for. It's to show us where this work needs to be done. And it's a really big time for technological advances that are going to help us do this. I'd like to mention also that the previous times where Saturn has been in Aquarius was in the early 90s and the early 60s. And to put some context there of what events happened in those times, in the last Saturn return, we had the www source code released, making it free and accessible to everyone. So if you think of the way that that changed our access to connection and community, and the fact that it was free for everyone, that kind of energy is what's going to come through in the next few years, making things accessible to everyone equally across the board. And the time before the other previous Saturn and Aquarius situation, we had a lot of civil rights movements going on and a lot of success with that. We also had here in the US the equal pay. So there's a lot of equality that's come forth during a Saturn Aquarius in the past. So when we see it in the future, we can think along those lines. I also want to mention that Pluto is also moving into Aquarius, but it'll be in 2023. So we get to keep having transits just shift more and more into Aquarius as we go into the future. So the farther we go into the 20s, the more Aquarius we get, which just helps. The more that there are in Aquarius, the more 5D we get to have. The last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was in 1777, which is the American Revolution. So I would say that that is a birth of a new era, and this year and the 20s are another birth. I also really want to spend some time on the really specific predictions I have, because they're real juicy. And these specific predictions are based on planetary transits. They're a bit, the origins of where they've come from are a little bit too technical to fit into a 10-minute time remaining. So I think I'm just going to go through the predictions, and I think that you'll find signs of them beginning already. I want to say that the power balance is going to be the beginning of this 5D shift, mostly from that Aquarian Saturn situation. And our values as a whole society will switch from value in money and value in hierarchies to value in equality, and also placing our value in information, in ideas, in the truth, and in how we spread that to each other. When I say values inequality, I also mean it very literally, that as we move into the 5D, astrologically, we're supported in equality between men and women, in more equality between social classes, more equality between race, which we're already seeing in America is becoming louder and louder as something that we need to fix. So, as we switch to 5D, these things will become a priority for most of us. Um, there's a very much like a free flowy type of love energy that can come with an age of Aquarius, but that means that the way we experience love may be more widespread. Love for the collective. Maybe even marriages will be done differently because we'll just feel more unconditional love for the all, for everyone. We can expect a greater sense of spirituality as a collective. I think that many of us are seeing that trend beginning now as more and more people are awakening and more people are just becoming interested in higher consciousness and their spiritual gifts. We'll see more of that, more and more every day going into the future, and more spiritually gifted children being born, more children being raised in spiritually high vibe type of areas. Let's do some. Okay, let's get spicy. There's going to be some climate shifts. This year is not quite the year for that to begin its party, but after this year, we're likely to see greater environmental efforts, which comes with that Aquarian energy. The way I'd like to think of it is how we've become more interested in monitoring our health, the way that we use trackers and apps on our phones to track our health and our Fitbits and all of this. We've become very interested in the metrics of health. I think that is going to happen more environmentally. So people will want to monitor their carbon footprint. And they'll do that through technology, which is ruled by Aquarius. It's just like a double whammy. There might also be more green transportation. I'll come back to that in a minute. But transportation is also under Aquarius since it's a public type of thing. Let's talk money real quick, because money has been part of the age of Earth for the last 200 years. And this old paradigm has been very physical money, like cash, bills, coins, and it's also been like real important, and which makes sense. But money is going to change, and the way that we do energy exchange, it's going to shift. I like to think that this might be influenced by the pandemic already, because we've seen just here in the US, if you go to a grocery store, you'll be encouraged not to use physical money. You'll be encouraged to use either a card or a phone or something that does not have touch. So in this case, COVID was sort of a catalyst into this new phase of money. Could be, moving to cryptocurrency. It could be something we can't even really fathom yet. But whatever it is, the way that we exchange money for goods and services will probably be non-physical. Well, there's a good example in a grocery store that is around where I live. People are now being able to scan for their payments just by waving their hand, making you kind of the money. Like you are the credit card, rather than needing a card or a phone, just things that aren't tangible. So money will shift to more of like how the internet is something that we all use and can't see, something along those lines. Also, since Aquarius is the ruler of internet and technology, we can expect huge breakthroughs in those areas as we move into 5D. And particularly the advancements we'll make will be ones that are around 5D type of themes. So the internet may undergo a revolution over the next 20 years. It will likely be faster, which seems to be how it's always been. It just gets faster and faster. There will probably be some innovation in terms of apps that help us with connecting to each other in a more fluid way. Medical apps, apps that help us reduce our consumption and waste and track it, and a lot more global online events, just like this one, a lot more of this, a lot more high vibe online type of connection. Transportation is also just a really big one with Aquarius as we move into 5D. It's just going to be greener, maybe electric, or perhaps there'll be a new way of harnessing power that will be invented through these technological times. I like to think there'll be more bikes. Lots of bikes, lots of walking. COVID has sort of already set the tone for less flying, which is also going to help us the environment. So it all kind of is beginning. There will probably be more space exploration as well, because that's technology. And the last times that Saturn was in Aquarius, yeah, we went to space. So that's likely to come about. One big thing that we've all seen is a division, between countries, and a lot of tension around that. But this Aquarian age and age of air in general is supporting a more global society, a little bit less us versus them, working together, working across nations. I wouldn't necessarily say that we're going to just do away with countries. Maybe eventually, but in the next 3 years, probably not. In the next 10 years, probably not. But we'll be able to work together as a priority rather than something that we just have to do because there's an emergency. It'll be something that we want to do, and that will raise all of our consciousness as we work together across the globe. We can also expect some changes in education. We're already seeing universities being online because of a certain pandemic and a lot of learning that's online. We're seeing sometimes the cost is being reduced because of this. That's going to be a big theme, and it's going to help all of us raise our consciousness through having access to higher education in a new way, I suppose. So, that's a lot of predictions to throw in a half hour, but essentially the stars and multiple large planets are on our side as we move into 5D. They're really, really supporting us. They're mirroring what we're seeing now. And after this year is done, you can expect it to just ramp up, just ramp all the way up into a more egalitarian society, very equal, very good. So yeah, thanks.
That was great. Okay, so a little bit of short-term pain still before we get to our long-term gain, but there's a lot of long-term gain ahead. Yep. And I really liked, how long is Pluto in Aquarius? Did you say that and I just missed it?
I didn't. I'm gonna go with a long time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Pluto moves very slowly, so yeah.
Right. So that's really interesting too. I love the last time it was there was 1777. Like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much, BP. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm sure we'll see you in a future expo.
Oh, yes, please. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.